For the first time this season, it's in Nico Rosberg's hands. A win will seal it, and a first ever World Championship crown for the younger Rosberg will come his way. Welcome along to round 20 of the Formula One season in 2016, and we're here at Interlagos, scene of 6 previous world title deciders. Could it be a magnificent 7th for Nico Rosberg later today? This glorious track has 15 corners, 10 to the left and 5 to the right. You take it at full throttle for 68% of the 2.67 miles. There are 2 DRS zones, and there is plenty of water on the surface. It's Interlagos, it's the race track between the 2 lakes, but quite frankly the rain's been falling long enough here in this part of Sao Paulo for the whole place to become a lake by the time we eventually get underway, and the start will be delayed by at least 10 minutes. The track is damp. The FIA and the race director, Charlie Whiting, has decided, well, we'll just take it a little bit cautiously. We want to give the drivers every possible chance of a standing start, but the forecast, Martin Brundle, is that the rain is going to carry on for at least the first hour of the race. So will we get that standing start, or will the safety car have to intervene?
It's a reasonably difficult call, I would say, now because of the standing water, and we've already seen one car in the wall. And if you aquaplane, obviously you're just a passenger at that point. We see them drying the boots of the drivers as they've walked up to the national anthem. They don't want to be carrying any water in onto the pedals. Sometimes you can get some galoshes, actually, that you wear that sorts that problem out.
Here's the grid then. Lewis Hamilton, 60th pole position of his career. Nico Rosberg alongside him. Kimi Räikkönen starts third. He won here from third in 2007 and has Max Verstappen for company. Sebastian Vettel, 5th, for only the 5th time in his career on the grid, has Daniel Ricciardo alongside him. Nico Hülkenberg's all on his own because Romain Grosjean crashed on his reconnaissance lap and won't take part in the race. Sergio Perez is alongside Fernando Alonso for McLaren in their 800th race on row 5. Then comes Valtteri Bottas as Williams didn't qualify in Q3 for the second time in 4 races. Bottas ahead of Gutierrez, Massa ahead of Danny Kvyat. Carlos Sainz has Jolyon Palmer for company. Palmer's out-qualified his teammate Kevin Magnussen 6 times in the last 11 races. Jenson Button, on the 4th anniversary of his last ever win, didn't make it out of Q1. He keeps Magnussen company. Pascal Wehrlein is ahead of Marcus Ericsson in the Sauber, and the back row occupied by Felipe Nasser and Esteban Ocon, who picked up a 3-place grid penalty for impeding Jolyon Palmer in qualifying. And what is out there to impede this man and his desire to become world champion today? Well, there's 21 other cars, 20 taking part in the race, and there's an awful lot that Mother Nature is throwing down as well. I mean, penny for the thoughts of either of these 2 drivers, Martin, but we're down to 2 battling for the world championship, and it's kind of now or never for Lewis Hamilton, and it could be now or never for Nico Rosberg.
I think it's a fact, isn't it, that for Hamilton to win this World Championship, he needs something to happen to Rosberg, be beaten by some Ferraris and Red Bulls, to keep winning the races, for something in the wall. He wants variability. Rosberg doesn't. He just wants straightforward races, and he can be the world champion. If he wins either here or in Abu Dhabi, he's the world champion, whatever happens. So he doesn't need any surprises. Definitely running a little bit less. I was interested on the grid to hear everybody I asked say, standing start, safety car start, let's do a standing start. There's a very much a wish to do that. I keep thinking we're seeing a replay here because I know there's a delay, but I'd want to be sitting in the car. I'd want to just get that all sorted out and be ready to go. But the 2 at the front, and there's Nico Hülkenberg, super relaxed about it all.
Yeah, you think you want to be in the cockpit on your own, you know, soaking it all up, but, you know, horses for courses. Every driver's different out there. Ted, down to you.
The teams are telling me, David and Martin, that the reason for this delay is that Charlie Whiting, the FIA race director, has been advised by the clerk of the course just to give the track at around turns 12, 13 time to drain a bit. Now, that is, of course, on the proviso that the rain is easing up, which it is, but only by a tiny, tiny bit. And I know the forecast is for the rain to ease up throughout the course of the afternoon. So it's a little bit less intense. The droplets now, I've actually got the brolly down now, don't need it anymore. And the clerk of the course just telling Charlie to just give it another 10 minutes for the track to drain. As you say, Crofty, the intention seems to be on Charlie's point to actually have a proper standing start, not a safety car start. But of course, the safety car start would help drain the water.
Ted, I'm going to interrupt you because the race will start behind the safety car.
Okay.
Now, it's an interesting one, this. Martin, you're quite right. the drivers you were speaking to wanted a standing start. Lewis Hamilton was actually on the team radio on his reconnaissance lap saying it's really quite dangerous out here, particularly up the hill and down to turn 4. There's a lot of spray, he said. Niki Lauda made a very good point. There's only 330 odd metres from pole to the apex of turn 1, and you're arriving at that turn 1 at a slower speed than they will be doing when we eventually get this race going. So it's a trade-off, I suppose, isn't it? That you know, do you get that slower speed from the outset now or in 10 minutes, or do you try a few laps behind the safety car to dry things out a bit more?
Let's just step back a little bit there, because if you were on pole position, i.e. leading the pack, what do you think would be your preferred route down to turn 1?
Decrease slightly, but will remain for at least the next 30 minutes like this.
Of course, Lewis wants a safety car start because he's guaranteed to have no dramas going into turn 1. He'll be leading the pack, so that one I can read reasonably easily. Certainly the rain appears to have eased off, as Ted was telling us. Esteban Gutierrez there. They have got a tent for him. They just didn't bother putting the tent up for Grosjean.
Yeah, not needed, unfortunately. And a few of you asking, why can't Romain Grosjean just jump into the spare car like, well, you did in Australia all those years ago, albeit for different reasons, of course, and running back to the pits. The reason being, there is no T-car, as they used to call it, made up anymore. There's enough spare bits, and there's enough parts, but they're all in bits around the back of the garage, and these cars are not made up anymore in advance of an incident like that.
Yes, to save cost, they allowed a spare chassis here, but it can only have a certain amount of wiring on it, and so it's a major job to build it up, which sounds a bit crazy to me, the amount of money they're spending and the people they've got in the factories not to have another one just to plug and play, frankly.
So they're splashing through the puddles is what it was like on the reconnaissance lap to the grid for the drivers. And take your point entirely, Martin. For Lewis Hamilton, starting behind the safety car, great for him. Let's throw that to Nico Rosberg then, and let's ask the question. Go back to Monaco, where he struggled for grip and struggled for pace in that race. Because of conditions just like this, is there a worry for him that the more laps he has behind the safety car, the less temperature he gets in his tyres, the less grip he's going to get, and when we do get going, he's going to get swallowed up by the pack?
It's possible, but I don't know why that would be any better or worse for Rosberg than any of the others if he can fire the tyres up, get them in the window. I think he too will be very satisfied with a safety car start, because he won't then have to wonder which way Max Verstappen fancies sliding up the inside of him down into turn 1. It's Max Verstappen, they know. We've seen him in a few free practice sessions, haven't we? He's mighty in these, and he was legendary for it through the junior racing. So I'm looking forward to seeing a little bit of that. I hope I'm not talking that one up too much.
I mean, he's going to have to worry a bit about Verstappen. If Verstappen gets a good jump behind him, there's a long way up the hill after the safety car has gone before we get into turn 1, so it might be Verstappen still there. Yeah,
he might well be with a bit of confidence, because it's not flat out. Those left kinks, we've already seen Grosjean go off at the first one of them. It just keeps turning left.
Give me some feedback on brake balance from the other car, from the laps to grid.
Yeah, on the laps to grid, Lewis did start with brake balance 66%. He's also got brake warming in our position 4.
Well, should we? Is there any downside in starting the race like that?
No, I don't think so. You obviously be using the brake warming magic as well, I think, behind the safety car.
All right, decode that one for us then.
I'm amazed at 66% if that's front bias, because normally 57, 58. You normally go rear bias in the rain, but we know they're incredibly complex systems, so you can't just apply that sort of logic and rationale to it. And they've got devices and mechanisms and processes to make sure they can get some brake temperature. But I was lucky enough to drive this Mercedes in the pouring rain, much wetter than this, it must be said, but we were doing it just for TV, so it wasn't for a race, and I was out on the track by myself, and I was astonished how well the brakes worked and how much grip there was, generally speaking. But of course, these will be pushing a little bit harder. But that suggests to me a little bit of uncertainty from Nico Rosberg sitting on the grid. What's he doing over there? I think I'll do a bit of that, if you don't mind.
Well, he's a man that the theory is, going into this race, doesn't generate temperature into his tyres, into his brakes as aggressively as his teammate does. So maybe that explains a little bit the indecision.
I think Lewis has a more acrobatic style, and he certainly has a confidence, doesn't he, in the car at all times. So on balance, you'd have to say it feels like Lewis's kind of conditions. And Rosberg's had some great races in the rain and some pretty ordinary ones.
Jenson Button, there's a man that's had a few half-decent races in the rain in his career. Starts 17th on the grid today. Don't forget, he finished 9th from 19th in Austin. Here's the Drivers' Championship again. 19 points clear. Nico Rosberg over Lewis Hamilton. So just to reiterate, a win will do it for Nico Rosberg. But he can finish as low as 6th today, and the title will be his. It depends on where Lewis Hamilton finishes, of course. I've got all the permutations on the commentary box wall, so we'll keep you as up-to-date as we possibly can throughout the race. There's a lot of people here hoping Felipe Massa scores some points today so we can get back into the top 10.
Nico, current forecast, 10 minutes like this, half an hour lighter rain, and then more rain after that, heavier rain after that.
Which is the forecast I was hearing as well. So we're not liable to see the slick tyres today, if that forecast is to be believed. In the Constructors' Championship, Mercedes have clinched it for the 3rd year in a row. Ferrari can lose 2nd place today. They need to outscore Red Bull by 21 points or more to carry that particular battle on. Force India and Williams, it's worth millions to either of those teams to finish 4th. Sauber and Manor, it's worth even more millions at the back of the grid. And, you know, if it isn't the conditions that Nico Rosberg probably doesn't want, I'm sure down at Manor they were looking for a dry race as well, because it's exactly the sort of race, Martin, where you can get a lot of crashes, a lot of accidents, and where Sauber, if they score 1 point, will leapfrog Manor and get those millions and millions.
Yes, $30-odd million that'll be worth to Manor if they lose it. I think it could even be worth more because of the way they entered the prize money situation. The columns, as they are for Sauber from a strong season, could be worth over $40 million if they can get back in the points. So yeah, a lot to play for there, and it looks fine from here, doesn't it, Crofty? Looks like we're ready to go.
We've got some handy puddles right opposite our commentary box at the moment. It is still raining and the puddles are still forming. Fernando Alonso, a man who 10 years ago at the Brazilian Grand Prix clinched his 2nd and still last World Championship. I wonder what he can do for McLaren from 10th today.
I think he would be pretty handy in that today, will Fernando Alonso. Power is about drivability. Peak power doesn't matter at all today in these conditions. If it dries out a bit more later on. 2 things to remind you: when we have a safety car start, they're all absolutely obliged by the regulations to start on the full wet tyre, not the intermediate. And also, if they use a wet or intermediate tyre at any point, the obligation to use 2 dry compounds in the race falls away. Now, that's clearly going to happen.
Last time we had, by the way, a safety car start here at Interlagos, and the only previous time the race has been started behind a safety car, 2003, Giancarlo Fisichella winning the race that day, and from 8th on the grid still remains the lowest grid spot for a winner of a Brazilian Grand Prix at Interlagos. In fact, in the last 5 years, drivers starting 1st and 2nd have actually led at the end of the 1st lap. 1 and 2.
Nico, just make sure you have a look at the curbs on these first few laps. I imagine there's going to be a lot of water stored in those curbs at turn 3, and there's reports of water at the apex of turn 2 as well.
Yeah, it seems like a good spot for a flock of ducks down there, to be honest. There's that much water in the curbs.
Good advice.
Is it a flock of ducks? I'm never quite sure.
I don't know.
Someone will tell us. There's a gaggle of geese, but I'm not quite sure what it is for ducks.
Is it a flight?
Not when they're swimming.
Right. So the front of the grid then, pretty steep uphill. There it is. Just to add a little bit into the mix of 100 and a few kilograms of fuel. They're allowed to use 100 kilograms of that. Fuel is measured in weight, not in volume, because the volume changes with temperature. The weight doesn't change. It's more precise. So it's like having a passenger and a half in the car. You've got to get the clutch right and guesstimate how much grip